present to you our first speaker, who is the Governor of Puerto Rico, Luis Fortuño. Running on a platform of individual empowerment, fiscal responsibility, and lower taxes, Governor Fortuño was elected into office in 2008 by the largest electoral victory in more than 40 years in Puerto Rico. He had previously served one 4-year term in the House of Representatives as Puerto Rico's sole representative to Congress. A graduate of the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service and the University of Virginia Law School, his earlier public service included a 4-year term as Puerto Rico Tourism Company Executive Director and Secretary of Economic Development and Commerce. Besides his duties in Puerto Rico, Governor Fortuño is active in service from national leadership positions. Besides his being National Committee man for Puerto Rico at the Republican National Committee, he is President-elect of the Council of State Governments, first Vice President of the Southern Governors Association, serves on the Board of Directors of the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices, and is one of only 10 governors serving on the President's Council of Governors. Ladies and gentlemen, the Governor of Puerto Rico, Luis Fortuño.
Well, good morning to you all. It's a pleasure to see so many good friends and familiar faces. And I want to thank you all for coming to our conference. It's truly a pleasure for me to welcome you all this morning. Certainly I'm delighted to once again have this opportunity to join so many of our investors, credit analysts, local and stateside financial industry professionals, and all the members of our fiscal and economic team. I want to thank our new Government Development Bank President, Juan Carlos Valle, and his entire team for putting together this excellent conference. And I want to thank you especially, Juan Carlos, for accepting the challenge of leading the GDB and our entire fiscal team up the road still ahead. I can help but think that the beautiful setting in which we have gathered this morning, here at the new St. Regis Bahia Beach Resort that we just inaugurated last November, is certainly an appropriate and auspicious sign of the progress we have been making. And by the way, we're working on the weather and it will be fixed by noontime. We meet today just a few months beyond the midpoint of our administration's first term, in a fiscal and economic context which is quite different, and I might add, much more encouraging than where we were when we held this conference in 2009 and 2010. This year's conference takes place at a promising new juncture for Puerto Rico, a juncture at which the fiscal reforms we have implemented have not only stabilized our government finances, but are now being considered a roadmap for other states and countries to follow. As many of you are well aware, we have come a long way during the past 27 months. We have delivered and will continue to deliver on the fiscal and economic reconstruction plan we presented just over 2 years ago. Now it's a good time to thank you all and the entire investment community, both in Puerto Rico and stateside, for staying by our side and believing in our plan and in our ability to deliver on it. It is appropriate that the theme of this year's conference is staying the course, changing our future. On the one hand, it captures the sense of discipline we have been demonstrated in our fiscal and economic reconstruction. It also captures how that discipline is already paying off, effectively changing the course of Puerto Rico's future. And so, before I go further, I would like to publicly recognize and thank the titanic effort of the very modest man who served as the architect of the fiscal and economic reconstruction plan. A man whose discipline, ability, and love for Puerto Rico made possible that we all together as a team might be able to change the course of Puerto Rico's future. This great conference is a sort of last curtain call for him, so I want to thank Carlos Garcia for the enormous contribution he has made to Puerto Rico. Certainly a great job. And I must add that Carlos would not have accomplished so much without a strong number two person, such as Fernando Valle. Thank you, Fernando, as well. Thank you both. Carlos and the other speakers who will follow me will expound in greater detail on a number of topics I will touch on only briefly in these opening remarks. But I want to provide you with the outset this morning with an overview of where Puerto Rico has been fiscally and economically, and where we are now, and where we're headed as we move on multiple fronts to create the conditions for an exciting new period of economic growth. As most of you know, in January of 2009, Puerto Rico's deficit stood at $3.3 billion, or close to 44% of revenues, a higher deficit, proportionally speaking, than any of the 50 states. Following its downward spiral between 2001 and 2007, Puerto Rico's credit was teetering on the brink of what would have been a catastrophic downgrade to non-investment grade or junk bond status. The government's fiscal situation was truly in a free fall. But we came in with the determination and will to fix it. Working with our legislature, we acted swiftly to approve legislation that allowed us to strengthen the central government's cash position in the short term. And we immediately proceeded to design our fiscal and economic reconstruction plan to get us out of the financial hole permanently. We implemented ambitious but responsible cost reduction and revenue enhancement measures. During the last 2 years, those initiatives have yielded a $1.8 billion reduction in government expenses, or almost 20% of our current budget. In addition to cutting costs and improving our liquidity position, we're also tackling head-on the challenge of funding our retirement system. On the positive side, we're among the few jurisdictions that back in 2000 had eliminated defined benefit plans. So we have eliminated the risk of widening actuarial deficits. And we have already started to improve our actuarial position through the early retirement window we put in place last year. But we need to do more. That's why when we gathered for this conference a year ago, I announced the creation of a special commission to address this historic challenge that can no longer be ignored. Since then, I have received the recommendations from that commission and will be ready to present consensus legislation in the next few weeks as a first step to tackle the unfunded liability of our pension system. In short, we have a plan that will allow us to gradually solve our unfunded pension liability problem in an orderly, prudent, and responsible manner. Can we be trusted to come through? Well, all I can say is our record speaks for itself. You be the judge. Over the last 2 years, we have achieved unparalleled fiscal improvement, reducing our deficit from 44% to 11%. Instead of being number 51 in the nation, we're 20th. Now, 31 states have higher budget deficits as a percent of revenues than we do. In fact, we're on track, and we remain steadfastly committed to completely balancing Puerto Rico's budget over the next 2 fiscal years, as we said we would do. And as many of you know, the progress we have achieved on the fiscal side has earned us positive reviews by the rating agencies of the kind Puerto Rico had not seen in decades. In April of 2010, Moody's acknowledged the progress of our fiscal stabilization plan when it upgraded Puerto Rico's credit rating from Baa3 the level right above jumped to A3. Then, 4 months ago, this past November, S&P changed its outlook on the island's credit to positive. Keep in mind that the last time we had seen a positive outlook for Puerto Rico from S&P was nearly 3 decades ago. And in another most welcome validation by our independent credit rating agency that our fiscal stabilization and economic reconstruction plan is working, Fitch Ratings assigned a BBB plus rating with a stable outlook to the general obligations of the government of Puerto Rico. S&P's positive outlook was the precursor to its action just last month when it gave Puerto Rico its first credit upgrade on our general obligation debt in 28 years. These positive actions not only take into account our fiscal progress, but also the new direction we are taking on an overall economic front. Because all the while we have been putting our fiscal house in order, we've also been changing the course of Puerto Rico's future. We've been implementing a pro-growth economic reform program supported by a series of key public policy reforms. To kick it off, given our limited public investment capacity, we enacted the most advanced public-private partnership law in the nation, paving the road to billions of dollars of investment and the creation of thousands of jobs in partnership with the private sector. Our P3 program includes the modernization of 100 public schools throughout the island and the full concession of major toll roads and of the Luis Muñoz Marin International Airport, among other major infrastructure projects. With our energy reform, within less than 2 years, Puerto Rico's fuel mix will have shifted from 69% petroleum to 72% natural gas. Via Verde, or Greenway, as our flagship natural gas project is known, is not only more environmentally friendly, but it will also help us reduce electric bills in Puerto Rico by double-digit percentage points. In addition to benefiting consumers, those savings will make a real difference in the competitiveness of our business and industrial sectors. And we're further diversifying our fuel mix to include renewable sources such as solar, wind, and waste-to-energy. Renewable energy projects are bringing with them significant new investment throughout Puerto Rico, along with the creation of new green jobs in our economy. An important area of pro-economic development government reform that's now complete is our permitting reform. Instead of going to 21 different agencies, businesses can now go to just one single permits office to get their endorsements. In cases not requiring detailed evaluations, the new system has resulted in an 85% reduction in the permit granting and approval process. And for major projects involving the site and land use consultations, a process that could take 3 to 5 years if you were lucky, it is now down to a maximum of 180 days. Last, but certainly not least, we have enacted a broad tax reform that will be a major driver for Puerto Rico's economic rebound. This is a pledge that I made to our people during our campaign. And despite the disastrous fiscal situation we encountered when we took office, we have delivered on our promise. Because I deeply believe that a tax reform is all about putting in the people's hands the power to change their own future. So, this past January, we enacted the largest tax reform in Puerto Rico's history. Starting this year, the top corporate tax rate will drop from 41% to 30%, and the previous 7-tier corporate bracket system will be simplified into 3 lower rates, 20, 25, and 30%. And starting in 2014, we're moving towards an even lower top bracket of 25%. And for individuals, this year alone, tax rates will drop an average of 25%, further dropping to a nearly 50% reduction over 6 years. We're implementing these tax cuts in a fiscally responsible manner. Individual tax reform reductions for years 2014 through 2016 will be contingent on the government meeting targeted goals in 3 areas: operating expenses, revenues, and economic growth. In other words, although we have already legislated those additional tax cuts for 2014 through 2016, in order for them to go into effect, the government will have the money to pay for them. Otherwise, they don't kick in. In addition, 1% of the budget in 2014 and 1.5% in 2015 and 2016 will be deposited into a fiscal reserve fund, thus providing a rainy day fund to make sure we never again sink into the financial hole from which we have managed to emerge with so much sacrifice and determination. On the revenue side, we enacted a temporary excise tax on the sale of certain products manufactured on the island, which will be reduced gradually each year through 2016, after which it will be eliminated. As confirmed by the IRS just a couple of weeks ago, the companies will be able to credit that excise tax against their federal income tax liability. In short, these companies will now be able to contribute to Puerto Rico's fiscal and economic reconstruction in a way that does not affect their bottom line, therefore protecting the operations and jobs they have nowadays on the island. In reviewing Puerto Rico's tax reform, former Congressional Budget Office Director Douglas Holtz-Eichen concluded that by better balancing our sources of revenue, our tax policy is decidedly pro-growth. In short, we now have in place a fiscally responsible tax reform that provides substantial, wide-ranging tax relief for individuals and corporations, promotes economic development and job creation, streamlines our tax system, and helps curb any tax evasion. Tax reform is part of our strategic model for a new economy, a multi-sector model of economic growth with a diversified portfolio of strategies that fosters economic development while reducing fiscal impact on state finances. As part of our socioeconomic development efforts, we will continue to work closely with both Congress and the White House to ensure Puerto Rico takes advantage of every opportunity available to foster a better future for all of us. In this regard, I would like to thank the President and his White House Task Force on Puerto Rico for giving due attention to its much-awaited report to a number of topics of great importance, including health, education, energy, and access to federal funds, among others. Ladies and gentlemen, after 5 years of recession, in which so many of the investors present at this credit conference have stood with us, I can say here with confidence that 2011 finds Puerto Rico on the rebound, at the dawn of a promising new era of sustainable economic growth, and I have no doubts of anything that I'm telling you. Our confidence is also shared by Business Monitor International. In its latest analysis, BMI has nearly doubled the rate of growth it projects for the economy of Puerto Rico over the next 5 years. That confidence is also shared by Federal Reserve Bank of New York President William Dudley. In his address in San Juan just last week, he noted, and I quote, "In contrast to the situation during my last visit last year, I am pleased to see signs that the Commonwealth may finally be emerging from this painful recession," end quote. Adding that our economic recovery is firming, he concluded, and again I quote, "I am hopeful that we will soon be able to look back at 2010 and see not only the end of the island's long recession, but also the beginning of an era of growth and prosperity for Puerto Rico," and I end quote. Friends, with our actions, we have together started to restore the confidence of both investors and consumers. Things are looking up, but we won't stop until we get the job done. We have changed the course of Puerto Rico's future, and a new era of growth and prosperity is upon us. I look forward to sharing that future with you all. Thank you, and enjoy your weekend.